All right. Stimulus control. It's something that's been on my mind lately. I don't know about you. It seems like one of those concepts that's just like everywhere in ABA.
Yeah,
But I feel like I only have like a surface level understanding of it.
it is. It's definitely a core concept. And,
Yeah.
and like you said, it has implications kind of far beyond just like the therapy room.
Right.
You know, just think of it as like this invisible hand that's shaping so much of what we do, from our morning routines to how we react in social situations. It's all kind of tied into this idea of stimulus control.
Okay, so to kick things off then, how would you explain stimulus control to someone who maybe, has heard the term but doesn't really fully get it, doesn't fully grasp what it means?
So imagine this.
Okay.
You're driving and you see a red light.
Okay.
What do? You hit the brakes, right?
Right.
Almost automatically. That red light, that's a stimulus, and you're braking behavior.
Mm-hmm.
That's the response. Stimulus control is essentially how those cues in our environment trigger predictable responses based on our past learning.
So it's not just about reacting to things, but it's about how those reactions are learned.
Right.
And they almost become automatic, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
B.F. Skinner, in his book Science and Human Behavior, really emphasized how understanding our environment is really key to understanding behavior. He argued that looking at the context in which a behavior occurs is just as important as the behavior itself.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like knowing why your dog goes crazy when you pick up any leash, not even his specific leash, but because he's learned to associate, leashes with walks.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of generalization,
Mm-hmm.
where a response extends to similar stimuli. Skinner talks about a pigeon that's been trained to peck a red spot,
Okay.
and then it also pecks at like orange and yellow spots because they share some visual properties with red.
Okay, so generalization is when the response kind of spreads out a bit.
Yeah.
What about the times when we need like a more specific response? Like how do we teach that pigeon
Right.
to only peck at red and not orange or yellow?
That's where discrimination comes in.
Okay.
It's like fine-tuning a response.
Oh.
Think about how you respond differently to your doorbell versus a knock,
Mhm.
or how you instantly recognize your own phone's ringtone.
Right.
That's discrimination. We've learned to differentiate between similar stimuli and respond accordingly.
So if we wanted to train that pigeon to only peck red, we would reward it for pecking red and not reward it for pecking other colors. And eventually it will learn to discriminate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this principle is constantly at play in ABA therapy,
Mm-hmm.
We use reinforcement to strengthen desired behaviors, and we withhold reinforcement to weaken undesired ones.
It makes me think about how we respond to babies crying.
Oh, yeah.
A new parent might rush to pick them up every time, but eventually they learn to discriminate between different types of cries, like hunger or tiredness or just wanting attention.
It's a great real-world example.
Yeah.
It really highlights how even complex social behaviors are shaped by stimulus control.
Yeah. Now, I'm wondering about some of the challenges that ABA professionals might face
Sure.
when they're applying these concepts in practice. Because, it seems pretty straightforward with red lights and pigeons,
Yeah.
but human behavior can be so much more complex.
Absolutely.
Right.
One challenge can be pinpointing the exact controlling stimuli
Uh-huh.
in complex environments. It's not always as clear-cut as like a red light.
Right, especially when you're dealing with things like anxiety or challenging behaviors.
Right.
There could be so many factors.
Exactly. It requires careful observation, data collection, and really understanding the individual's unique learning history to figure out like what is driving the behavior.
It's like detective work, isn't it?
It is.
You have to piece together the clues to figure out what's actually controlling the behavior.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to be creative. You might try manipulating different aspects of the environment to see what has the most impact on the behavior.
So you're not just observing passively.
Yeah.
You're actively testing out hypotheses
Yeah.
and using those results to refine your understanding.
Exactly. And this brings up another challenge too.
What's that?
The ethical considerations involved.
Right.
Manipulating the environment.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that we're dealing with real people's lives here.
Right.
And any interventions need to be carefully considered and implemented with their best interests in mind. It really highlights the need for a deep understanding of the individual and their specific circumstances.
It's like you can't just apply like a one-size-fits-all approach. You need to really tailor the intervention
Exactly.
to the person and the environment.
And that's where the concept of functional control becomes so important. It's not enough to just identify like a stimulus. We need to understand its function.
Right.
Like how it's actually influencing behavior.
I remember we touched on functional control briefly in the last segment.
Yeah.
But I'd love to like unpack it a bit more.
Yeah.
How would you explain it in simple terms?
Think about it this way. A red light means stop.
Okay.
Not because of some inherent property of redness,
Right.
but because of its function. It consistently triggers stopping behavior,
Right.
meaning in this sense is derived from function.
So it's not about what the stimulus is, but what it does.
Exactly.
Look.
Skinner gives the example of like mistaking fog for smoke.
Okay.
You know, the same visual stimulus could lead to very different responses, continuing your walk
Right.
or running for safety, depending on like the function you've assigned to it
Right.
based on your past experiences.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
It shows how, like, our interpretation of a stimulus is shaped by the behaviors it's likely to evoke.
Right.
It's not about, like, some objective reality,
Right.
but our own learned responses.
And that's what distinguishes simply sensing a stimulus from actually perceiving or knowing something.
Okay.
Think about like hearing a sound.
Right.
The sound waves hitting your eardrum, that's the sensory input.
Mm-hmm.
But hearing the sound involves recognizing it, associating it with a source,
Right.
and potentially triggering other behaviors.
So hearing, like, your favorite song might trigger you to start dancing.
Yes.
While hearing, like, a car horn might cause you to jump back from the curb.
Right.
The same basic sensory input,
Right.
but very different responses.
Exactly.
Based on the functional meaning we've assigned to those sounds.
And this has profound implications for ABA therapy.
Okay.
When we're trying to understand challenging behaviors, we don't just look at the behavior itself.
Mm-hmm.
We try to figure out its function.
Yeah.
What purpose is it serving for the individual?
So a child who's having tantrums might not be doing it just to be defiant. The tantrums might be serving a function like getting attention.
Exactly.
Or escaping a demanding task.
Right. And once we understand that function, we can start to change the environment and teach more appropriate ways for the child to get their needs met.
This concept of functional control is starting to click for me.
Good.
It's like a whole new lens for looking at behavior. Instead of just seeing a behavior as good or bad, we can start to understand the why behind it.
Right. And that understanding is crucial for developing effective interventions. It's not about just suppressing behaviors. It's about teaching new skills and creating environments that support positive change.
This feels really empowering.
It is.
It means we're not just like victims of our circumstances. By understanding how stimulus control works,
Exactly.
we can start to take more control of our own behavior and help others do the same.
That's the beauty of ABA. It gives us these tools to understand and shape behavior in a positive way.
Okay, so we've talked about how identifying, controlling stimuli, and understanding their function is key.
Right.
But what are some practical strategies we can use to actually change behavior based on these principles?
Well, one of the most powerful strategies is manipulating the environment.
Okay.
By strategically changing the stimuli that surround us, we can influence our own behavior and the behavior of others.
So if I'm trying to break like a bad habit, like endlessly scrolling on my phone, I could start by like leaving my phone in another room or deleting those tempting apps.
Exactly.
By removing the cues that trigger the behavior, I'm less likely to engage in it.
Exactly. And you can also introduce new stimuli to prompt desired behaviors.
Okay.
For example, if you want to exercise more, you might lay out your workout clothes the night before or create a visual reminder on your fridge or something.
It's like setting yourself up for success.
Yeah.
Making those desired behaviors more accessible and those undesired behaviors less tempting.
Exactly.
I'm already starting to brainstorm ways I can apply this to my own life.
And it's not just about personal change.
Right.
ABA professionals use these principles all the time to help individuals with a wide range of challenges.
Give us an example of how this might play out in like a therapy setting.
Let's say a child with autism is having difficulty transitioning between activities.
Okay.
The therapist might use visual supports like a picture schedule to clearly signal the upcoming transition and make it more predictable.
Okay.
They might also reinforce the child
Right.
for completing the transition smoothly.
So you're not just telling the child to do something.
Right.
You're creating an environment
Exactly.
that supports their success.
Exactly. And by using these strategies consistently, you can gradually shape behavior and increase independence.
This is fascinating. Yep. It's like we're peeling back the layers of behavior and seeing how even subtle changes in the environment can have a big impact.
And we're just getting started. Yeah. It's really amazing how much insight we can gain from just observing the relationship between our environment and our actions. And Skinner, in his work, really pushes us to think beyond those simple stimulus-response connections.
You mentioned some more nuanced examples from Skinner's writing that challenge traditional views of stimulus control.
Yes.
I'm really curious to hear what those are.
So one that stands out is this idea of cross-modal induction. It's where a response is under the control of two stimuli that seem to have no physical properties in common.
Okay, that sounds a bit abstract. Can you give me a concrete example?
Sure. Think about the word sharp. We use it to describe both a physical object, like a knife,
Right.
and a sensation, like a pain.
Right. A sharp knife can cause a sharp pain.
Right, but wouldn't it make sense to use the same word to describe them?
Yeah.
Since they're connected.
Yeah.
That's the interesting part. Skinner suggests that the connection isn't always so direct. There's often like an intermediate link, a verbal one. We might first learn to say that knife is sharp, and then because sharp knives cause sharp pains,
Right.
we extend that verbal label to the sensation itself.
So the word sharp becomes like a bridge between the visual stimulus of the knife
Yes.
and the tactile sensation of pain.
Exactly.
It's like language helps us connect those seemingly unrelated stimuli.
Exactly. And this highlights the power of language in shaping our perceptions and responses.
Yeah.
It's not just about labeling things, it's about creating these conceptual links that influence how we experience the world.
It makes me think about how we use metaphors and analogies all the time to understand abstract concepts.
Yeah.
We're constantly borrowing words from one domain of experience and applying them to another.
That's a great observation. It suggests that stimulus control isn't just about those basic concrete associations. It can operate on a much more like complex conceptual level.
This brings up another fascinating concept that Skinner discusses, responding to a relation.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean?
So imagine you've trained an animal to always choose the larger of two objects, but then you introduce a new, even larger object.
Okay.
And the animal's behavior changes.
So instead of consistently choosing the larger object, the animal's response now depends on the relative sizes of the objects present.
Yeah, precisely. It's as if the animal has learned like a rule or a concept, not just a specific stimulus-response association. Skinner argues that this highlights the importance of context. We're not just responding to isolated stimuli, but to relationships between them.
This makes me think about how we often make decisions based on comparisons.
Yes.
Not absolute values, like choosing a product based on how its price compares to others, or how we judge our own happiness relative to those around us.
Perfect examples.
Yeah.
Our behavior is often influenced by those relative values and relationships, not just the stimuli themselves.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening.
Good.
It's like I'm seeing stimulus control everywhere now.
It is.
From those basic everyday examples to these more nuanced ways in which it shapes our understanding of the world.
Yeah, it really is a powerful concept, and the more we understand it, the more we can use it to make positive changes in our lives and the lives of others.
As we wrap up this deep dive, is there one key takeaway you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I'd say the most important takeaway is that our environment has a profound impact on who we are and what we do.
Yeah.
But the good news is that by understanding stimulus control, we can start to exert more conscious control over our own behavior and create environments that support the changes we want to see.
So it's not about feeling like we're at the mercy of our surroundings, but rather becoming more aware of those influences.
Exactly.
And using that knowledge to shape our experiences in a positive way.
Exactly. It's about becoming architects of our own lives, one stimulus, one response at a time.
That's a fantastic message to end on. Thank you so much for guiding us through this fascinating exploration of stimulus control.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those deep dive questions.
Absolutely.
Until next time, on ABA Chapter Chat.